the lost 7,000-year secret behind Sleeping Beauty. Throughout history, fairy tales have been much more than simple bedtime stories. Behind their enchanting castles, cursed princesses, and magical spells often lie secrets that stretch far beyond imagination. Sleeping Beauty is one of these tales, a story we believe we know, yet its roots go deeper than we've ever been told. What if I told you that the origins of Sleeping Beauty could be traced back not just centuries, but 7,000 years, hiding ancient knowledge buried under layers of myth, ritual, and forgotten civilizations? The story, as we know it today, tells of a princess cursed by a wicked fairy or sorceress, pricking her finger on a spindle and falling into a death-like sleep, only to be awakened by true love's kiss. But to truly understand the enigma, we must dig beneath the polished version written by Charles Perrault in the 17th century and the Brothers Grimm in the 19th century. The real mystery lies in what came long before them, in a time when storytelling was not mere entertainment, but a vessel of survival, tradition, and cosmic truth. Historians and mythologists have long speculated that Sleeping Beauty is not a European invention, but a retelling of much older myths that traveled across continents. One striking parallel comes from the ancient Sumerians, civilizations that thrived in Mesopotamia around 5000 BCE. In their myths, we find stories of gods and mortals falling into enchanted slumbers, trapped between life and death, awaiting a savior or divine intervention. Consider the Sumerian goddess Inanna, who descends into the underworld and is struck down, left hanging lifeless for 3 days until her resurrection. Her tale echoes the core themes of stasis, dormancy, and reawakening. Similarly, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of humanity's oldest surviving texts, there are tests involving sleep, in which Gilgamesh himself fails to stay awake, symbolizing human weakness and mortality. These connections suggest that sleep, in the ancient world, was never just about rest. It was a metaphor for transformation, death, and rebirth. Even more compelling is the presence of the spindle in Sleeping Beauty's story. Why a spindle and not a sword or a knife or any other object? The spindle was not a random choice. In countless ancient cultures, the spindle represented the thread of life, a cosmic symbol used by priestesses, weavers, and oracles. In Greek mythology, the Moirai, or fates, spun and cut the threads of life for every mortal. In Norse tradition, the Norns fulfilled a similar role. The act of pricking the finger and drawing blood was, therefore, not only a curse but a ritualistic offering to destiny itself. This revelation reshapes our understanding of Sleeping Beauty. She is not merely a victim of a spell, but a symbolic representation of humanity's entanglement with fate, time, and cycles of existence. Her sleep is more than a pause. It is a journey into the underworld, mirroring shamanic initiations where individuals were believed to die temporarily in order to return with wisdom. Yet, as we peel back these layers, an even deeper question emerges. Why would such a profound myth, rooted in ancient mysteries, be disguised as a fairy tale for children? Was this a deliberate act to preserve hidden truths in a form that could survive centuries of censorship, wars, and cultural upheaval? What exactly was being protected? And why was it considered so dangerous that it had to be veiled in allegory? The secret behind Sleeping Beauty is not just about a girl in a tower. It is about the survival of knowledge, encoded through myth. And this knowledge, older than most civilizations, may carry the key to understanding humanity, its connection to cycles of time, fate, and even immortality. As we continue this journey, let us explore how the Sleeping Beauty story intertwines with ancient rituals of sleep and resurrection. Across countless cultures, sleep was seen as the threshold between the physical and spiritual realms. In Egypt, around 3000 BCE, priests believed that dreams were a portal to the divine, messages delivered by gods in the stillness of slumber. The Egyptians practiced dream incubation, sleeping in temples to receive guidance from higher powers. Doesn't this sound eerily familiar to a princess lying dormant, awaiting intervention from forces beyond the ordinary? In Greek mythology, Hypnos, the god of sleep, was twin brother to Thanatos, the god of death. To the ancients, sleep and death were two sides of the same coin. A long, enchanted sleep was not a fairy tale invention, but a sacred metaphor for the passage into another world. When Sleeping Beauty pricks her finger and collapses into stillness, it is not merely unconsciousness. It is a symbolic death, a descent into darkness from which only divine love, fate, or spiritual awakening can rescue her. And what of the curse itself? In older traditions, curses were not just malicious spells, but warnings or tests. Anthropologists have uncovered evidence that some tribal initiations required the symbolic death of a member before they could be reborn into adulthood. The curse in Sleeping Beauty's tale may actually conceal the memory of ancient initiation rites, where a young woman was secluded, immobilized and ritually asleep until she emerged transformed, purified, and prepared for her destiny. But the mystery deepens when we consider the number 100 years, the length of Sleeping Beauty's slumber. Why such a long and specific duration? In esoteric traditions, the cycle of a century was linked to cosmic renewal. The Hindus spoke of yugas, vast cycles of time where humanity rises and falls. The Mayans tracked ages that repeated in spirals. The 100-year sleep may not be literal, but a cipher, encoding humanity's collective pauses, eras where civilizations collapse and later awaken in rebirth. We must also consider the role of the savior. In modern retellings, it is the prince who awakens the princess with a kiss. But in older versions, such as Giambattista Basile's Sun, Moon, and Talia from the 1600s, the awakening is not caused by a kiss at all, but by the birth of children, a much darker and symbolic resurrection. Here we see that awakening is not romantic, but existential. It represents the continuation of life itself, the cycle of fertility, and the unstoppable march of destiny. What is astonishing is that these layers connect to myths thousands of years old, suggesting that Sleeping Beauty's story was never meant to entertain, but to encode truths about humanity's survival, mortality, and transformation. The lost secret of 7,000 years may very well be that this fairy tale was a disguised ritual text, a map of death, sleep, and rebirth that humanity has carried unconsciously across millennia. The more we examine Sleeping Beauty, the more we realize that her tale is not isolated but part of a grand, interconnected web of myths. One of the most fascinating parallels emerges from biblical narratives themselves. Consider Adam's deep sleep in Genesis. Before Eve is created, Adam is cast into a slumber so profound it mirrors death. From his side, life is drawn. This resonates with the theme of transformation through stillness, of life emerging from a symbolic sleep. Could this be one of the earliest echoes of the archetype later woven into the fabric of Sleeping Beauty? The Bible also speaks repeatedly of awakening. In the book of Daniel, there is a prophecy that many who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, some to shame and everlasting contempt. Here, the motif of sleep becomes inseparable from resurrection and final judgment. To the ancient mind, sleep was the rehearsal of death, and awakening symbolized not only survival but transcendence. When we connect these texts with the Sleeping Beauty myth, we begin to see a continuity. A princess in a timeless sleep, awaiting her moment of resurrection, is not just a fairy tale heroine, but a representation of humanity itself, dormant, waiting for a divine awakening. This becomes even more intriguing when we look at apocryphal writings and mystical traditions. The Kabbalists, for example, often spoke of the soul as asleep when disconnected from divine truth. Their goal was not merely knowledge, but awakening, the piercing of illusion to achieve enlightenment. In this context, the spindle that wounds Sleeping Beauty becomes a double-edged symbol. It brings suffering, but it also initiates the passage into the deeper mystery. Without the wound, there can be no transformation. Without the curse, there can be no awakening. Let us also not overlook the role of the women in this story. Sleeping Beauty is surrounded by fairies, some benevolent, one malevolent. But could these figures represent something more ancient than fairy tale sorceresses? Across Indo-European cultures, we find female spirits associated with fate, time, and destiny. The Greek Moirai, the Norse Norns, the Slavic Rozhanitsi, all spinning and weaving the threads of existence. These beings were not mere characters in myths. They were embodiments of cosmic law. The fairy who curses the princess may, in fact, be the shadow of fate itself, the unavoidable darkness within the cycle of existence. In this light, The story becomes less about good versus evil and more about the dual nature of destiny, both the gift of life and the inevitability of suffering. Another striking symbol is the thorn hedge that grows around the castle during the princess's long slumber. On the surface, it is simply a barrier to protect her from intruders. Yet thorns are a biblical symbol as well. After the fall of man, the ground is cursed to produce thorns and thistles, a mark of suffering and separation from paradise. In the Sleeping Beauty tale, the hedge of thorns embodies this exile from the world, a barrier between mortal life and divine slumber. It is only when the destined moment arrives that the hedge parts, allowing the hero, or perhaps humanity itself, to move forward. Thus, when we put together the threads, from Sumerian myths to biblical passages, from Greek goddesses to Kabbalistic mysteries, a remarkable pattern emerges. Sleeping Beauty is not a passive victim, but a cosmic archetype, carrying in her silence the deepest truth of human existence, that we are all sleepers, moving through cycles of death, waiting for the Great Awakening. The tale we tell children at bedtime may actually be one of the oldest survival codes humanity has ever preserved. But this discovery leads us to a chilling question. If the ancients encoded such profound wisdom into fairy tales, what other secrets might still be hidden in the stories we dismiss as fantasy? Could there be entire libraries of knowledge veiled in children's tales, waiting to be deciphered? And if Sleeping Beauty carries a 7,000-year-old truth, what then is its ultimate message for us today? To answer this, we must broaden our scope even further. Let us travel east, to India and China, where legends of enchanted sleep and cosmic cycles flourish with uncanny similarity. In Hindu mythology, the god Vishnu is often depicted in a state of cosmic slumber, resting upon the serpent Ananta Shesha, floating in the endless waters of existence. From this dreamlike state, universes are born and destroyed in repeating cycles. Vishnu's sleep is not weakness but power, the slumber of creation itself. Could it be that Sleeping Beauty echoes this very concept, portraying sleep not as an end, but as the womb of rebirth? In Chinese Taoist traditions, sages spoke of the Great Sleep as a metaphor for harmony with the Tao, the eternal flow of the universe. To awaken from this sleep was to transcend illusion, to pierce through the veils of false reality. Once again, the myth converges, sleep as dormancy, awakening as enlightenment. In this way, Sleeping Beauty may be less about romance and more about initiation into higher truths. A reminder that humanity's destiny is not to remain dormant forever, but to awaken to its divine purpose. Yet the most haunting parallels come from European pre-Christian traditions. Among the Celts, stories abound of heroes and kings who lie sleeping beneath hills, waiting for the destined day to return. King Arthur, for example, is said to rest in Avalon, awaiting Britain's greatest need. The motif of the sleeping sovereign is more than folklore. It is the belief in cyclical time, that heroes and nations do not die but slumber, ready to be reborn. Sleeping Beauty fits perfectly within this archetype. She is not dead, but waiting, embodying hope that the cycle will turn and light will return. The thorn hedge that surrounds her castle also resembles the mythological cauldrons of rebirth, or enchanted barriers that separate worlds. Just as heroes must pass trials to reach wisdom, the hedge prevents easy access to the sleeping truth. Only those destined, those willing to face the mystery, may cross. Could it be that the prince is not a literal figure at all, but the seeker of truth, the initiate who dares to pierce through illusion and awaken the eternal wisdom hidden within? This interpretation suggests that Sleeping Beauty is, in essence, a manual of initiation disguised as a story. The curse represents the suffering and ignorance humanity must endure. The sleep represents the long cycle of dormancy, both cosmic and personal. The hedge represents the barriers that keep us from truth, and the awakening symbolizes enlightenment, the moment of union with destiny. When seen through this lens, the tale is not a warning, but a promise that no matter how long the darkness lasts, the awakening is inevitable. What makes this secret so profound is its survival. For 7,000 years, through Sumerian myths, biblical stories, Hindu cosmology, and European folklore, the same theme has endured. Humanity is asleep but destined to awaken. Sleeping Beauty is not a passive fairy tale but a prophecy encoded in narrative form. A seed planted in the minds of children so that, even in ignorance, the truth might survive. It is one of humanity's greatest hidden legacies. But if this is true, then another mystery confronts us. Who preserved this knowledge? Who carried these themes across millennia, shaping them into stories that children would remember, long after civilizations crumbled? Was it mere coincidence? Or was it the deliberate work of secret keepers, sages, and storytellers determined to pass on a message humanity could not afford to lose? As we approach the climax of this mystery, we must confront the possibility that Sleeping Beauty is not only a myth about cycles of sleep and awakening, but also a coded reflection of humanity's deepest fears. The fear of forgetting, of falling into spiritual amnesia, and never rising again. Ancient storytellers may have used the narrative to warn future generations. Do not sleep forever. Do not forget who you are. When we examine the passage of myths across cultures, we notice that certain archetypes persist as if they were eternal truths carved into the human psyche. The Jungian perspective suggests that stories like Sleeping Beauty survive because they resonate with archetypes buried in the collective unconscious. The princess represents innocence, the curse represents fate, the sleep represents death, and the awakening represents transformation. These elements, timeless and universal, form a map of the soul. But Jung's analysis doesn't fully explain the 7,000-year continuity of these themes. For that, we must look beyond psychology and into the realm of secret knowledge. Throughout history, there have always been those who considered themselves guardians of truth: the priestly castes of Mesopotamia, the initiates of Egyptian temples, the druids of Celtic lands, the mystics of medieval Europe. They understood that power often lay not in weapons but in symbols. By embedding knowledge in stories, they ensured survival. Even if libraries burned and temples fell, the story could live on in the mouths of children. It was perhaps the most ingenious act of preservation ever devised. Sleeping Beauty may therefore be a cipher, designed to hide wisdom from those who would destroy it, while revealing it to those who seek it with open eyes. In this light, the spindle becomes not just a tool of fate, but the key to initiation, the blood sacrifice required to begin transformation. The hedge of thorns becomes not just an obstacle, but the trials of the seeker. The century-long sleep becomes not just a pause, but a metaphor for humanity's long exile in ignorance. And the awakening becomes not just romance, but illumination. What then is the great secret preserved for 7,000 years? It is that humanity is not meant to remain asleep. The cycles of suffering, ignorance, and repetition are not endless prisons but stages of initiation. Just as the princess cannot sleep forever, neither can humanity. There is always a destined moment of awakening, an appointed time when the walls of thorns part and the hidden truth emerges once more. Sleeping Beauty reminds us that no darkness lasts forever, and no slumber is eternal. This realization leads us to one final layer: the role of love in the story. Modern versions focus on romantic love, the kiss of a prince, but older versions reveal a deeper truth. The awakening is not about romance, but about union. It is the union of the soul with truth, the union of humanity with its destiny, the union of the seeker with wisdom. Love, in its purest sense, is not desire, but connection, the force that bridges sleep and awakening, death and life, ignorance and enlightenment. Without this connection, the cycle would remain incomplete. So the story of Sleeping Beauty, once dismissed as a simple fairy tale, is in fact a monument of memory, a coded transmission of the greatest truth humanity has ever known: that we are destined to awaken, no matter how long the slumber. But this truth carries a challenge as well. If the story has been preserved for us, what will we do with it? Will we remain passive sleepers? Or will we dare to pierce the thorns and awaken to the destiny that has been waiting for millennia? Now, at the end of our journey, we arrive at the heart of the mystery. The lost 7,000-year-old secret behind Sleeping Beauty is not a curse, nor a prophecy of doom, but a promise. It is the promise that darkness is temporary, that sleep is only a passage, and that awakening is inevitable. Humanity may drift through ages of forgetfulness, but the truth cannot be erased. Like the princess in her tower, truth may slumber, hidden behind walls of thorns, but it will never die. This is why Sleeping Beauty has endured when so many other stories have been forgotten. It survived because it carried something essential: hope. It is the assurance that every fall is followed by a rise, every silence by a song, every sleep by an awakening. And in a world where civilizations crumble, where memory is fragile and easily lost, that hope is perhaps the most powerful secret of all. But this conclusion also invites us to look inward. The tale of Sleeping Beauty is not only humanity's story, it is yours. How many of us are asleep right now, not in our beds, but in our lives? How many lie trapped behind walls of thorns, walls of fear, doubt, or despair? How many of us are waiting for something outside ourselves to awaken us, when in truth, the power to awaken lies within? Perhaps the real secret hidden in Sleeping Beauty is that we are both the princess and the prince, both the sleeper and the awakener. The kiss we wait for is the choice to rise, to see, to live fully. The moral of the story is clear: do not remain asleep. Do not let the curse of ignorance or fear hold you captive. The cycles of suffering are not prisons but doorways. You carry within you the same destiny encoded in this ancient tale: the power to awaken, to break the thorns, and to reclaim the truth that has been waiting since the dawn of humanity. So the next time you hear the story of Sleeping Beauty, remember, it is not just a fairy tale. It is a prophecy, a code, and a reminder of who we are. We are sleepers destined to awaken, and nothing, not curses, not centuries, not thorns, can keep us from that moment forever. The lost secret of 7,000 years has always been this: there is no curse that cannot be broken and no sleep that lasts forever. And now, dear listener, the choice is yours. Will you remain asleep, or will you awaken? Conclusion: Sleeping Beauty teaches us that life is not about avoiding the curse, but about embracing the awakening. The story whispers across the centuries: do not fear the darkness. Do not despair in the silence. Even in the longest night, the dawn will come. And in this message, carried through thousands of years, lies humanity's greatest inheritance: faith in the inevitability of transformation.